Okay, we are ready to wrap up the last of the E's of the 5E model and look at the evaluate piece of this scope. So the evaluate, as you can imagine, is typically going to be a summative evaluation, meaning this is when you're at the end of your 5E arc and you're ready to assess your students' knowledge and skills towards the end. There are some pieces in here that you can use for formative assessment, and those would be assessments that you would use throughout the 5E to check and see how students are doing. And so we'll kind of look at how you could use these as well. I'm going to show you the second grade version, and then I'm going to hop to an upper grade because they have slightly different things here in the evaluate. So first of all, let me come to the pull down menu, and you'll see that there are several different things that are available. You've got these in English and Spanish, and these are all assignable. And I know that they're assignable to students because they all have this blue S beside them. So the first thing we're going to see is the post assessment. So if we click on this, we're going to see that there are some multiple choice questions that I can assign to students. And I could do that either by printing them out. I can put it in my Google Doc, print it out, or I can assign it online. So these are going to be multiple choice questions that are aligned to this particular standard. Typically, there's about 5 questions here. This may or may not be enough for you to really use as your summative assessment, so you may want to make an assessment that's a little bit longer, and I'll show you how to do that in the assessment section of this training, or you may want to combine it with some of the other pieces that are in here. So in addition to the post assessment, we also, which is multiple choice, we also have open-ended responses, which I highly recommend that we use either as formative assessments during the 5E or at the end add it to the multiple choice. So this is again going to be something that you can print out. You can add to your Google files. You can print it out. You can put it into your plans if you would like to do that. Or you can assign it online. So you can see that there's a question, and then usually it'll have some sort of image that goes along with that. And one of the things that I think is most powerful about the open-ended responses is if you have a comprehensive or interactive word wall in your room, you could ask students to use those terms, those key academic vocabulary terms, as they answer these questions. And that's really going to help them master those vocabulary words. So just to give you an idea of what some of these look like. This one only has 3 questions. And if I go to the print version, you'll see it looks just like it did online with the same color pictures. So great writing practice there. Okay. So going back to evaluate, we also have something called a concept builder, and these are going to be activities. Sometimes these are able to be done online, and sometimes these are actually a performance task where students have to build or make something like a foldable or something to represent something that goes along with this particular science content. And so if we scroll down on this one, it's got in the form of a mission that they are supposed to create a new musical instrument using the materials provided, and this would relate to the sound energy. These may or may not be super great summative assessments, and they may be something that you could use actually in elaborate rather than evaluate. So I think this one is kind of flexible where you use that. Okay, finishing off, I mentioned this when we were in the elaborate because this is called writing science. So it's similar to the open-ended responses, except you have actually a prompt. So you'll notice that you have this familiar look, think, and then write. So it gives you a prompt, it gives you a picture, and then it asks students to write to a particular set of questions. This is also included in your science literacy pre-printed book that each student has. You can print it out. You can save it into your Google Drive, and you can also assign it to students. So you have a variety of ways to use this, and these are also excellent resources. This one only has 1 question. Typically they'll have 1 or maybe 2 questions on there, but they're a little bit more in depth. And again, don't forget your text-to-speech bubble. If you sign this online, students can have this read to them. The last piece I want to talk to you about is the claims, evidence, and reasoning. This is also a fairly new resource that they've added. This really ups the rigor, but it takes a little bit of time to train students on exactly how to do this. We've had some training in the district about this. If you've come to some summer PD, I've mentioned that. Claims, evidence, and reading is something I hope to keep including in more of our PD and our resources. But basically, how this works is you have some sort of scenario or data that you look at. So in this case, we have the second grade class, they added butter to a hot pan and they wrote their observations in their science notebook. So maybe something very similar to what they did during their 5E. Then we come down, it says, thinking like a scientist, explain the changes the students observed. So they would say something like, well, the longer the butter was on the pan, the more it changed. Or the butter started as a solid and it changed to a liquid over time. It's just basically taking their observations and making them into a sentence. And their evidence would be the why. So it would explain, well, why did the butter change the longer it was in the pan? And so the evidence piece would be because the pan was hot, causing the butter to melt. So I won't be doing a little mini claims evidence reasoning PD right now, but just know that this is there and be watching out for that. Feel free to go ahead and dive into it. This is really great higher level thinking, and there's a little rubric key there too, so I just wanted to point that out. So before we leave the evaluate, I want to go to an upper grade. Remember, we're in second grade, so I'm going to go back to home where I've bookmarked a fourth grade scope. So I can show you some of the different things that are in the upper grades, and this is typically third, fourth, and fifth. So we're talking about evaluating, so I want to show you where those pieces are in the upper grade scopes. In the essentials, when we did the pull down menu, second grade did not have a pre-assessment in there. And then we see that fourth grade does. So these are typically going to be about 5 questions, pretty low level questions that students could be asked maybe at the beginning during the engage to get an idea of their background knowledge for this particular topic. So there's a pre-assessment piece here. And as we move through, you'll also see that there is another assessment that is progress monitoring assessment. Again, this is for in the upper grades. And if we click on this, we're going to see multiple choice questions again. Still pretty low level, pretty straightforward questions, but again, these are great as formative assessment checks, or you can actually pull some of these from the assessment bank, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit later in the training. And then finally, we have the same pieces that we had in second grade are here as well. There may be some additional pieces in Evaluate that we haven't seen in either the second grade example or the fourth grade example, so feel free to explore. Some grade levels have some new components in there, so feel free to look through those and always refer to the unit overview for my notes. I try to keep up with that to help guide you a little bit. So that's an overview of the Evaluate. We're going to go ahead and stop there and let you take some time to explore.